The disrespected woman in uniform. What happened next left everyone speechless. The sun blazed over Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas at exactly 1,545 hours. The flight line shimmered with late afternoon heat, the kind that makes your uniform stick to your skin and every breath feel heavy. Rows of folding chairs faced a makeshift stage near Hangar 7, filled with fresh-faced Air Force officers straight out of training. Boots polished to mirrors, name tags gleaming, every single one sitting at attention, waiting for the promotion ceremony that would change their careers forever. That's when she walked in. She wore the standard OCB flight uniform, sleeves rolled with military precision, pants tucked into boots that had clearly seen better days. But something was off. No visible rank, no name tape, no unit patch, just the uniform and a presence that seemed to fill the space around her without making a sound. She moved deliberately toward the back row, her eyes scanning the crowd but never quite meeting anyone's gaze directly. That's when the whispers started. Who is she? Is that someone's MOM? Why isn't she wearing any rank? A few lieutenants shifted uncomfortably in their seats, uncertain whether to say something or stay quiet. But First Lieutenant Ryan Parker didn't hesitate. He stood up from his chair, adjusted the freshly pinned silver bar on his shoulder, and walked straight toward her. His posture was parade ground perfect, chest out, shoulders back, the way his instructors had drilled into him during commissioning. His voice carried enough authority to cut through the murmur of conversations. Ma'am, this area is restricted. This is an official Air Force function. If you need directions, the family tent is on the east side. She looked at him, just for a moment. Not annoyed, not afraid, just silent, calm, like she had seen this exact scenario play out 1,000 times before. Parker hesitated. Something about her stare made him uncomfortable, but he covered it with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ma'am, did you hear me? Still, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there with her hands clasped loosely behind her back, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched, that strange kind of quiet that creeps in when people are watching something they don't fully understand. The kind of moment that makes you lean forward without even knowing why. And in that moment, everything felt just a little off. Like maybe this wasn't what it seemed. Like maybe the one being watched wasn't the outsider after all. Parker didn't walk away. If anything, he doubled down. He stood his ground in front of her, his lips tightening, his tone sharpening with each second that passed. It was now 1,549. To everyone else, the ceremony was just minutes from starting. But for Parker, this had become personal. His voice cut through the low murmurs around them. Ma'am, I'm going to say this one more time. This is not open to civilians. You need to clear this area right now. Andrea, though no one knew her name yet, didn't flinch. She just stood there, calm, still, unmoved. From the chairs behind Parker, a couple of lieutenants leaned forward. One of them whispered something about the uniform. Another noted she hadn't saluted a single officer since she arrived. A third quietly asked why she wasn't wearing a rank patch or name tape. Parker heard all of it, and it only added fuel to whatever was already burning inside him. His jaw tightened. He pointed at her chest where a name tape should have been. If you're in uniform, where's your name? Where's your rank? You're out of ranks, ma'am. This is not a joke. Still, nothing from Andrea. Just a slow blink. A breath. Her hands remained calmly clasped behind her back. It was the silence that made it worse. Parker expected her to get defensive, to argue, to say something he could push back on. But she didn't give him that. She gave him nothing. The air around them thickened. The rest of the officers nearby fell quiet. Even the wind seemed to hush. Parker's voice raised again. He was no longer just enforcing protocol. He was trying to assert control. Trying to prove something to her. To the officers watching, maybe even to himself. This is your last warning. If you don't leave, I'll call security. Military police will remove you. Do you understand? A flicker of something crossed Andrea's eyes. Not fear, not defiance. Just the kind of patience that only comes from knowing exactly where you stand and how little his voice actually mattered. And still, she didn't move. Someone nearby shifted uncomfortably. Another officer looked at Parker, then back at her, then down at their boots. And for the first time, Parker began to realize he might have misjudged something. But he didn't stop. Because when your pride is louder than your training, you forget to ask the one question that could have changed everything. Who are you? At exactly 1,553, footsteps echoed across the concrete behind the crowd. Sharp, unhurried, steady. Colonel William Harris, the commanding officer of Laughlin Air Force Base, stepped into view. He wore his service dress with the ease of someone who'd spent decades earning every ribbon on his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes swept across the scene with surgical precision. They locked instantly on Andrea. He didn't pause, didn't question. He came to a stop just a few feet from her, snapped to attention, and offered a sharp, crisp salute. His voice deep and absolute cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "Ma'am, welcome back. We're honored to have you with us today." The entire area froze. Parker's hand, still half raised in mid-gesture, dropped to his side. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The other officers turned one by one, blinking as if their vision had betrayed them. Harris turned to face the group. His expression was stone. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the tarmac, "allow me to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Blake." There was no applause, no movement, just breath held too long and 1,000 unspoken questions jammed in the back of every throat. Andrea didn't speak. She nodded once, slow and measured, that same unreadable calm on her face. But this time, it didn't feel like silence. It felt like command. Parker stepped back, his boots suddenly too loud on the pavement. His eyes darted between Andrea and Harris, his face pale, his mouth dry. The weight of everything he hadn't asked, hadn't seen, crashed down on him like a slow, sinking wave. No one said a word. No one needed to, because in that moment, every unspoken judgment that had hung in the air minutes before had been swallowed whole by a single truth. She wasn't just someone. She was the highest-ranking officer in the room, and she had been standing there the entire time, waiting for them to notice. Before she ever stood on that concrete with silent eyes and no name tag, Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Blake had already lived the kind of career most airmen only read about in briefing slides. She started in flight school like anyone else, grinding through the early hours and long nights at Columbus Air Force Base. But it wasn't long before she earned her spot in the A-10 Thunderbolt to the Warthog. The aircraft wasn't sleek or flashy, but it was reliable, tough, and devastatingly precise. In every way, it matched her. Over 3 deployments to Afghanistan, Andrea logged more than 1,400 combat flight hours. She flew close air support for ground troops pinned down in valleys, under fire, in terrain most wouldn't dare cross. She didn't just fly missions, she led them. She was eventually given command of the 74th Fighter Squadron, one of the oldest and most respected units in the Air Force. But the story that stayed with everyone came out of her second deployment. It was a late afternoon sortie, a rescue operation gone south. A platoon of U.S. soldiers had been ambushed outside Ghazni, low on ammo and trapped by enemy movement on 3 sides. Andrea responded within minutes. Her A-10 took her directed on the right engine on the first pass. Smoke poured from the fuselage. Comms were dead. She had to rely on PI brief coordinates, training, and pure instinct. She stayed in the fight for 17 minutes. 17 minutes without communication. 1 engine gone, taking fire from ground forces. But she held. Her final run gave the ground team just enough space to exfil. Every one of them made it out alive. She landed the aircraft back at Bagram, with 1 engine and half her flight systems offline. She climbed out soaked in sweat, uniform torn, hands shaking from adrenaline. For that mission, she was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross in 2016. During her 3rd tour, a spinal injury from a rough landing grounded her permanently. But she didn't retire. She transitioned into training, mentored new pilots, helped rewrite parts of the Air Force's tactical doctrine. Now, she serves as a strategic advisor for the Air Force Leadership Development Directorate, quietly shaping the minds of the next generation of commanders. She never talked much about what she did. She never had to. Lieutenant Parker stood frozen, shoulders squared, chin tucked slightly, hands clenched behind his back like a cadet caught cheating on an exam. The color had drained from his face, and his voice, once loud and commanding, was nowhere to be found. Colonel Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His words landed with the force of rank and experience. "Lieutenant, you can apologize to her directly right now, or I'll initiate a formal inquiry with the Inspector General's office by 1,700. Your choice." It was 1,557. Parker swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, the words barely made it out. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Andrea stood calmly. No trace of anger in her expression. No satisfaction either. Just measured quiet. "You didn't need to know, Lieutenant. You just needed to care enough to ask." Her voice was even, controlled, almost gentle. It wasn't a lecture. It was a mirror. And everyone watching felt the sting of that reflection. Colonel Harris turned toward the group of young officers, his gaze sweeping over them like a spotlight. "Leadership doesn't begin with orders. It begins with respect. What you witnessed here is the first test of every leader's character, and Parker just failed it. There was no applause, no nods, just silence. The kind that settles in when a room full of people realize something important has just happened. Parker didn't respond. He remained at attention, face locked forward, the weight of the moment settling like lead on his shoulders. But Andrea had already shifted her gaze. She didn't press. She didn't linger. The point had been made not through punishment, but through grace. In that moment, Parker wasn't humiliated. He was humbled. And the difference mattered. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the tarmac as Andrea Blake stepped forward to begin the pinning ceremony. The rows of young officers were tense, sitting at attention with polished boots and eyes fixed on her every movement. Each step she took echoed softly, but carried the weight of her presence, commanding attention without a single word. When she reached Parker, the moment felt suspended in time. He stood rigid, eyes straight ahead, not daring to meet her gaze. The tension in the air was palpable, a mixture of expectation and unease. Andrea stopped in front of him, her posture calm, her face unreadable. She reached out and placed the promotion pin on his shoulder with steady hands that betrayed none of the drama that had just unfolded. As she did so, she spoke quietly, a few words meant only for him. Leadership isn't about being right, Lieutenant. It's about being present, being aware, and knowing when to listen before you speak. Parker's head bowed slightly in acknowledgement, a mixture of shame and understanding crossing his features. Andrea moved on seamlessly, performing the same careful, deliberate ritual for each officer in line. There were no grand gestures or theatrical displays, only the quiet assertion of authority and respect. Each pin was placed with precision, each step measured. The officers watched her. Some swallowed hard, others blinked back surprise. All of them sensed the gravity of the act before them. The ceremony continued, a rhythm of dignity and recognition that transcended the initial tension. Her calm, unwavering presence transformed the atmosphere. The reverence was quiet but universal, a collective acknowledgement of experience, merit, and character. Each officer, regardless of prior missteps or insecurities, felt the lesson in respect conveyed without humiliation. As the final pin was placed, a ripple of applause began, soft at first, then rising as the entire assembly joined in. It was not a triumphal cheer, but a measured, sincere recognition of the values that defined their service. Andrea Blake stepped back, her eyes scanning the group briefly before turning to face them once more. She didn't need to raise her voice. She never did. "I want to share something with you," she began, her tone even but commanding. "Something I learned a long time ago, and something I hope you'll carry with you as you move forward in your careers." The officers leaned in, captivated. "During one of my deployments to Afghanistan, I was flying a close air support mission. The ground team I was supporting had been pinned down under heavy fire, surrounded on three sides, running low on ammunition. On my second pass, my aircraft took a hit. One engine caught fire. My radios went dead. I couldn't call in coordinates. I couldn't rely on backup." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Every training exercise had prepared me for moments like that, but the reality was harsher, louder, more chaotic than anything I'd ever experienced. Her gaze swept across the officers. "But despite the chaos, I remained steady. I trusted my training. I trusted my instincts. I trusted my team. I navigated through smoke and fire, guided by the briefings I'd memorized, by the markers I studied, and by the experience of every mission I'd flown before. My focus never wavered from the soldiers on the ground." She let the silence hang for a beat. "They made it out safely, and I managed to land that aircraft with one engine and a prayer." A few officers nodded, others sat in awe. "From that mission, I learned something that I want to pass on to you today. Leadership is not about yelling louder or demanding obedience. It's about being calm in the storm. It's about listening, making decisions under pressure, and setting an example through action." Her voice softened, but the intensity remained. "Leaders earn trust by showing competence, humility, and consistency, not by asserting rank alone. You don't lead by telling people who you are. You lead by showing them." She took a breath. "So as you move forward, whether you're flying missions, commanding units, or mentoring the next generation, remember this. Start with respect. Respect for those around you. Respect for your team. Respect for the mission. End with trust. And you will have built more than a squadron. You will have built loyalty, integrity, and a lasting example of what true leadership looks like." The room was silent. Every young officer felt the weight of her words, the credibility behind them, the inspiration she imparted without force. It was a lesson in leadership rooted in experience, conveyed with calm authority and profound respect for those who follow. The ceremony had ended, and a calm had settled over the tarmac. Andrea Blake walked slowly away from the center of attention, each step deliberate, her boots making soft impressions on the concrete as the afternoon sun stretched shadows long across the base. The officers she had just honored stood quietly in formation, processing the lessons they had absorbed without words. The tension that had gripped the space earlier was gone, replaced by a reverent stillness. As she moved toward the parking area, a young second lieutenant, still wearing the crisp uniform and the newly pinned insignia, broke from the line and jogged to catch up. Her pace was hurried, almost stumbling over her own feet, eyes wide with admiration and gratitude. "Ma'am," she called out softly. Andrea paused, turned slightly, and offered a small, knowing smile. The young officer caught her breath. I wanted to say thank you for what you did today, for being here, for showing us what real leadership looks like. I felt out of place sometimes, like I didn't belong. But seeing you today, it made me feel like I do. Like we all do." Andrea's smile deepened, just a little. She placed a hand gently on the young officer's shoulder. "You've always belonged, Lieutenant. The world just hasn't always noticed. But you will, and when your time comes, make sure you notice the ones who come after you." The young officer nodded, her eyes glistening. Andrea continued walking. The base was quieter now, the earlier noise replaced by the soft shuffle of boots and the occasional distant hum of a training aircraft. Andrea reached the edge of the parade grounds and stopped. She turned back to watch the formation of officers march across the sunlit tarmac. The light caught the edges of their uniforms. The movement was steady, precise, and for a moment, the scene felt like a living testament to discipline, respect, and growth. She stood still, letting the moment linger, absorbing the significance of what had just transpired, and the subtle, lasting impact it would have on those who had witnessed it. It was a silent lesson in leadership, in patience, and in the quiet power of earning respect rather than demanding it. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the base, and Andrea Blake remained there, a figure of calm strength, leaving behind a room, a formation, and a future subtly changed by her presence. If this story reminded you of the leaders who shaped you or the lessons you are still learning, hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Warriors for more powerful, real-life stories of courage, respect, and quiet strength. We bring you the untold moments that define true leadership. Don't miss the next one.